Welcome to the first episode of AboutProSound with live sound pioneer Bob Heil. Bob's contributions to the concert audio scene in the late 60s and early 70s landed him an exhibit in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Welcome, thank you.
Glad to have you guys.
When I first started doing sound, like at 14 years old, early 70s, and it was just a local band, I would go and get a little PA. Okay, which would be a pair of trainer columns and a Heil mixer. But that was like one of the first PAs I ever used.
We did that early. It was 1968, 69. All that we had at that time were the little Altec four inputs for broadcasts.
Right.
And that's all we had to do shows with.
In the early 70s, when I would go and work, I offered on the trucks and do stuff for the local sound companies in Philly. Front of house in a 20,000 seat venue was a bunch of Altecs stacked up, or Bozaks, even sometimes M67 Shures.
Yeah, exactly.
There wasn't until like a couple years later when you started seeing like the first slide fader consoles.
Yeah, it's been fun.
That was the beginning, 68. Was that the first product?
Actually, Thanksgiving Day, day after Thanksgiving in 66, I opened Ye Olde Music Shop. I hardly knew who the Beatles were. And when I tell people that, knowing my history in rock and roll today, they don't believe me, but it's true. Why? Because of what's sitting across the room. I was dyed-in-the-wool theater organs. At the age of 12, I started playing the organ. At the age of 14, I was playing professionally, making as much money as my teachers. I knew what I was going to do. This was it. The next year, I became the substitute organist at the Fox in St. Louis. That was a big deal because we had to voice and tune 3,500 pipes from 1 inch to 32 foot. Voicing taught me how to listen. Very few people know how to listen. Listening, you got to mentally go in and dissect. And I didn't know how important that was all going to be in my career. And in 2 of my careers, it's been just incredible. I woke up real quick when people like Michael Mcdonald and REO Speedwagon, only they weren't known by that. They were just garage bands from Champaign who would come down. Michael was in Florissant, and I started fixing. They'd bring things for me to repair, because they found out there was a guy with a soldering iron and I could fix it because of what's behind us here. And that's
so when did you start with the ham radio show?
When I was 15, the same year that I worked at the Fox. I built that from a kit in that would have been, what was that? That was 1958. Wow. And so there's nothing here that's newer than 1960, right?
People will go spend, they made some compressors.
Collins? Yeah, could be.
I know people that they'll spend tens of thousands of dollars if they get their hands on a Collins compressor. People today just don't get the whole you built it yourself thing.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in Philly, which is where Dynaco was. And it was great because you could buy a Dyna kit. If you messed it up, you could take it down to the factory and the guys would come in. And for $15, they'd fix it for you.
Well, I loved Dyna kit, and I loved it because I started selling Sunn amplifiers. I became the largest Sunn amplifier dealer in the country. And that was a Dyna kit amplifier.
Was it really?
Yes, it was. Chrome chassis. What had happened?
Was it tube or transistor?
Oh, absolutely. 6550s, EL34s.
So like the Mark III, the mono?
Yeah. And what happened is one of the Sunn brothers was a carpenter. Well, I can build this, so he built the speaker boxes. What are you going to do for an amplifier? They went and got a Dynakit amplifier. Then they said, well, we ought to start building these. And when they did, they just copied that. It was a great amplifier.
My first PA, we had 2 Dynaco Mark IIIs, 60-watt mono amps.
Sure, great stuff.
We didn't like to be hauled around too much, but...
Yeah, well, that's the whole deal. When I got into the PA's business big time, I'd put a bunch of A7s and things like that together like everybody else did in '68. And we were doing some country acts that would come through St. Louis, and Dolly Parton and little Jimmy Dickens and all that. Little All-Tech mixer and that kind of stuff. Then I get a call from the Fox. Now, I hadn't been playing there for some years, but they called me and said, hey, you need to come down here. We're going to throw out this sound system here. 1932, I think it was built, some Western Electric, 16-foot folded horns, you know, big stuff.
People would give lots of money for that now.
And I'm going, wait a minute. So I go get a pickup truck, and it's a ham radio in me now.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking beyond that. And so I started putting together a big hi-fi system, Macintosh amps, all that.
Yeah.
And I had a friend that had a fiberglass business, and we built radial horns, because I didn't like the cast horns. They rang like. So we did it in fiberglass. And again, I'm just monkeying around. Then the big turn in my life was when the Fox called me again in 1970 and said, we have a disaster. I said, what's wrong, man? He said, the group came in here tonight and their PA's not here. I said, what happened to it? Well, the FBI and the DEA's confiscated it last night. What are you talking about? And for historians of rock, you know what happened. It was the Grateful Dead. They were going to do this little short tour.
What year was this now?
1970, February.
Okay.
And they were going to do New Orleans, St. Louis, I think it was Ohio, and New Jersey. The stage manager, he handed the phone to Jerry. He said, what kind of amps do you have? And I said, Macintosh. And I never forget this. He almost dropped the phone. You have a Macintosh amps? And I said, yes, sir, because, everybody else was, messing around with All-Tech. We went and did that show that night, and the rest is history. There was a journalist there, and he wrote an article, The Night Rock and Roll Sound Was Born. And the guy, I never met this guy. It hit Bilboard Magazine, and all hell broke loose. We really took off. Well, that's an interesting picture. Marissa, Illinois had 2,000 people in it, and there was only 2 blocks long. The block before me had a drugstore, that drugstore, and a pharmacy and all that. The Dead came in one time, Weir, Pigpen, and of course Jerry. And my store was always a lot of kids in it, and there were people around. It was really great because I didn't care. They could come in, sit down, play guitar. I had all kinds of really luscious things. And I didn't care. Nobody heard anything. Other stores, they wouldn't let you touch them, But that's how I sold so many of them. I was kind to these guys. Okay. So the Dead were rolling around, and I said, where'd Jerry go? I don't know. We couldn't find him. So, what? I walked up the street. I would pay money for this picture. They were here. Jerry, Pigpen, all lined up eating ice cream. And I'm standing outside the door, and I hollered, hey, Jerry. And he looks up and he goes, I would pay money. I know, you have to believe me.
I absolutely believe
it. It's a true story. Now, an interesting thing that happened right after the Dead thing, bands would come in, one would be in a Volkswagen van, another would be in a pickup truck, another guy in a Chevrolet car. Never got there at the same time. So I do believe I was probably the first to lease a semi, 40-footer. I bought an old Greyhound bus, put 11 beds in it so we could sleep the crew. Just shortly after it then, I get a call from this manager, you got that big PA? And I said, yes, I do. He said, well, we need it in Boston tomorrow night. I said, that's not possible. What do you mean it's not possible? And I said, well, we can't get there because we got to drive all up. He said, I don't care, you got to be here. We need you. I said, what's the problem? Who are you? He said, we are the Who. I'm going, uh-oh. This was not some garage band. So we worked it out. He said, you go out to the airport, jump into a Flying Tigers 747, drove our semi, drove our bus, and away we went. And there's quite a history there because they came over here with all new music. They hadn't been here in 4 years. They had little WEM columns.
Yeah. I saw them once in the early 70s with WEMs. PA that you couldn't hear 20 feet from the stage.
And they came over with this new music, Who's Next tour. And that first night, the media ripped them apart. And they said, this is not going to happen. Daltrey was ready to go back home. He said, I'm not doing this. True story. And Bill Eberline, who worked for Sunn, we were good friends, he had to take him outside and promised him, look, he said, he had to calm him down. He said, after we got there, he said, you got to try this. Just come in. No, I'm done. And when he came back in and did the sound check, everything was okay because it was a monster PA from what everybody else had. And I didn't know that.
You were doing manufacturing, the mixers?
Yeah, right before 69. I was building little stuff. In fact, there's one laying right there. It was a guitar preamp. Nobody was doing that kind of thing. The first one I built was for Walsh. When he was still with the James Gang, I did a couple of shows. Then he got out and formed Barnstorm. Barnstorm, the equipment for that was built in my plant. We put it together because he needed a Mellotron.
Josh's dreams is to own a Mellotron.
I was a U.S. distributor.
Very finicky.
Yeah, especially to try to take it on the road. We were doing that stuff. We need mixers. My power amplifier was very unique. The 200 and the 400 watt. They were modular. When you bought it, you got an anvil case with a spare module.
You started that simultaneously?
The retail store, I sold that in 74. And we had built the plant in 72. We had 35 people working in that plant. We were building all kinds of things. We had a little rehearsal hall type thing, and where our semis could come in. By then we had a lot of them. And it was all centered around the touring. It would have been 72. I had to build 2 other systems because we had contracts for Geils, Humble Pie, and on and on. We had 3 systems on the road, and these were monster tours. They were across America. Then we started picking up dealers that would like to buy it. We had 250 dealers split out into the road systems and the retail stuff for the dealers. It really grew quick. Well, the whole industry. Right. You woke up one morning and said, what happened here? And away we all went. We were trying everything. There was no one company, person, whatever that was king. We were just all trying to make it happen. It was really great. And nobody was doing that kind of stuff. But there again, ham radio. I thought modular was a way to do it. And we built the first modular consoles. That mixer you had was modular. The Quadrophenia tour, we built that quad console. Nobody had done that. I didn't know, I just did it.
It wasn't until like the mid-70s that there was really consoles.
Yeah, exactly.
It may sound to some people like, okay, 70 to 74, it sounds like a relatively short time. There was a lot happening in that.
That really did. We built that console. Well, we did 2 years with Who's Next. I just had done all these crazy things that I didn't know no one else was doing. This Mavis was interesting. The IES, International Entertainment Systems in London, David Hartstone, we formed sister companies because when he'd come over here with Emerson Lake, I had all the Olsen bins and stuff. His engineer, Bill Hoff, he was a very sharp engineer, started working on a console. It was, to me, the very first entertainment console. Yeah. It weighed 300 pounds. Modular, that was my input to it. Pete called me after we did the Who's Next tour. Come over here, I want to talk to you. So I go back over. 1973, quad sound is big right now. He said, you think you could make a PA that we can move Roger's voice around the hall? Yeah, we could do that. He said, well, you do it and I'll go finish writing it. That really took me. It was only about a month before the final build of the Mavis, and it was enough time that we could build the switching panel to be able to do the quad. And it worked.
Quad panners?
I did that. Yeah, the first ones didn't, but the last ones did. The other ones we did with rotors, so it worked the
like
same.
Front and back, 2 rotors.
Those were all fun times. I don't know if I could have done it any better. All I know is we did it probably faster.
Necessity's the mother of invention.
Yeah, it was. It all started with that crazy pipe organ and ham radio. I couldn't have done it without.
At EAW, we had all this engineering department. We did some of the first beam steering. Where you could make the arrays.
Yeah.
All that's based on antenna theory.
Absolutely.
Because that's who did, they did it for the radar.
Yeah.
So that is where the math that created all the stuff for the beamforming, beam steering. There's really no fundamental stuff that's done in the industry. It's you find something from some other place and figure out how to apply it. No one's out there doing material science for sound.
That's right.
Well, this is a cool material someone did for this. What happens if I try to make my diaphragm out of it?
You know, I wasn't connected with the outside world.
One of the things that I found talking to people like yourself, it was embryonic in the early 70s. It was very regional. You know, you had McCune doing all sorts of neat stuff in San Francisco, but no one on the East Coast ever heard of that.
Yeah, right.
You were doing stuff here in the Midwest. It wasn't until later in the 70s, and really in the 80s, where you started having these national connections, and you know the industry started really becoming an industry. This seems like an excellent point to end part one of our talk with Bob Heil. It was indeed a pleasure to have an opportunity to sit and hang out with Bob. His remarkable story how he kickstarted rock and roll touring services from the little town of Marissa, Illinois is unique. He's one of the true pioneers of the live sound industry.
Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us a lot. Please stay tuned for our next videos. Loudspeaker engineer Kenton Forsythe, engineering guru Dave Gunnis, rational acoustics Jeannie Anderson, industry veteran Joe Manning, Jerry Lopez, and Mike Bangs, to the pageant to hang out with Randy Knowles.
Coming soon.
Please reach out, leave comments, and let us know what you would like to see, or if there's any topics you would like us to speak about, leave them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And for direct contact, you can also reach us at info@aboutprosound.com. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.
We hope you enjoy the show.